Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Now, across the globe, militaries are reassessing the risks posed by connected vehicles, with countries like the UK, Poland, and Israel restricting Chinese-made electric cars and even Teslas from sensitive sites over fears that sensors, cameras, and telemetry could be exploited for espionage. As these policies spread, they raise complex questions about technology, about trust, and geopolitics. And today, we're joined by Alicja Bachulska, Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations Asia Program, to discuss all this more. Good to have you in the studio. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's draw on your expertise. Let's go back. I mean, this criticism here is, why are we doing this against the Chinese EVs? But who started all this? Give us a bit of history in all this.
I think it's very important to look at what's happening at the moment in the context of why EVs and connected vehicles are so important for China itself. So if you look at Chinese behavior, China has made the strategic bet to invest a lot into EVs because of this kind of industrial policy approach in which Beijing has designated EVs as the industry of the future. So a few years ago, I would say around 10 to even 15 years ago, there was this push to designate these specific areas in which China would then invest and build a dominance. Initially, they wanted to build a dominance, and now we're actually seeing the results of this approach here on the ground. But also, China has made very strict regulations on the ground domestically that are very symptomatic of its own approach towards security related to these connected vehicles. And back in, I think, 2021, Tesla was banned by China from entering certain facilities or areas that were somehow seen as sensitive in terms of security. So it's very clear that China was the first to actually look at connected vehicles through this more securitized lens, because of the way it has been aware that they can be used for, well, multiple reasons when it comes to data collection, when it comes to kind of spatial awareness, and the way these cars are not only cars as we kind of imagine them in Europe, so, you know, just kind of mechanic vehicles that are used to move from place A to place B, but also as the super intelligent, high-tech computers that can gather data and then use them for various reasons.
So, I mean, and some would argue that that makes sense to limit some of that, especially near sensitive facilities, military facilities. Now, certain countries, Poland, the UK, are doing the same, but not, it seems, in the same sort of policy. So I'm also curious, I mean, do we have evidence of such claims that, you know, certain data is taken? Is this just precautionary? Is it both? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So this is part of a much bigger debate about political trust towards China. So on the one hand, we are now at the stage where we're kind of coming out of the spirit of engagement, where we thought that China is going to, you know, behave as a quote-unquote responsible power, that it will become, again, quote-unquote, more like us. So it will be more, maybe not politically liberal, but economically liberal. And in retrospect, we now know that this has not been the case. China's industrial policy has resulted in this new kind of an environment in which now we are not only dependent on China when it comes to some technical communication solutions such as 5G. Again, a long-standing debate whether we should ban Chinese providers from Poland and from Europe. And this is a kind of a never-ending story, a saga that we haven't seen an end to it yet. And again, the evidence stems from this kind of assumption that China as an authoritarian power, as a party state that is predominantly guided by not the rule of law, but the rule by law, and this law is created by the Chinese Communist Party, in the end has the power to use this data to whatever reason. And that is why if we don't fully trust China, we cannot also trust Chinese-made high-tech equipment or these connected vehicles, because they can, in the end, pose a threat to us. But it's not only about China, as you already mentioned. It's also about the fact that these cars in the future, if we go down the same road and buy more of these kind of vehicles, we will be also more susceptible to hacking, to acts of sabotage by third parties, not necessarily states or state-linked actors, but also by, just people who have a certain interest in hacking or misusing this kind of vehicles.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think I want to draw it out a bit further. I mean, we talk about Chinese EVs and all this, but I suppose it's any kind of EV that is more and more, as you said, more and more systems, it's telemetry, it's data, it's location, all this data. So is there one part of it, is there a standard for any of this? Are the Chinese bound by something if they're selling and making those here in Europe? Are we bound in Europe by that? Are the Americans bound by that? Is there a standard anywhere? Is this, let's say, Achilles heel we missed?
I think that, it's very important to look at China's own regulations, as I said first, because they are very indicative of the fact that these vehicles have the ability to do certain things. But again, we are in Europe somehow catching up with the development. So we missed these developments for many years. And now specific countries and specific actors are trying to come up with solutions that might work, but we don't know yet precisely what the scale of this challenge is, especially that over the past year, it's very clear here in Poland that Chinese EVs have made a huge leap when it comes to market access, and they are seen in Poland, despite the tariffs imposed by the EU, as very attractive. It's visible on the streets in Warsaw, in other big cities. But again, this is not only a problem, as you mentioned, about Chinese EVs per se. Chinese EVs have a comparative advantage at the moment. There are more of them, so that's why we are talking mostly about them. But Teslas and other cars can also be a problem. Mm-hmm. In the kind of geopolitical environment we are operating in at the moment, it's extremely unpredictable. And these vehicles can basically be weaponized, no matter where they come from.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, if we're looking at this and these examples, I mean, for instance, Israel, IDF banned these Chinese EVs like the MG, BYD from certain military bases. The UK has done the same for some of its own Royal Air Force bases. So the military argument maybe could be understood, but if the public sees this, what kind of impact can that have on their consumer behavior? As you said, there is more of a prevalence of Chinese-made manufacturers. BYD now surpassed Tesla in terms of global EV sales. How is the public perception going to be affected from this?
I think it depends what country we're looking at. In Poland, my gut feeling is that Polish people are very keen to embrace this kind of novelty technologies, especially if they're cheaper than their Western competitors. This has already happened with Chinese smartphones, such as Huawei or ZTE or Xiaomi. And now I think that the perception of these Chinese electric vehicles is changing. It's becoming much more positive, but we haven't yet seen any kind of data-based research or surveys to actually back this kind of an intuition that I'm having. But I think it's also important to understand that there is a huge PR push on China's side also to present these EVs as part of the future. As you know, China is the future. Europe is kind of behind, and there's no way Europe can speed up its efforts to remain competitive in this area, and that we have to somehow surrender to this new wave of Chinese technologies in Europe. And I think it's important here to kind of understand that this is a very intentional move on China's end, but people are, as of now, I think still quite positive here in Poland about Chinese EVs, but we might see different developments, especially if the security angle is backed up by more evidence or a growing awareness of China's broader security logic when it comes to having ties with Europe. And here, again, very clearly, there's plenty of evidence that showcases that China's interest, core interest in security are much more aligned with Russia's than with Europe's.
So just in closing as well, do you see the kind of an alignment shift here as well for Europeans as well, more towards the Americans, that we're banning these EVs that are Chinese made, but we're aligning more with the Americans? Do you see that playing out here?
I'm not sure, frankly. So I think that for Europe, it has been a long process of understanding what the risk is, and it was very EU style, so very legalistic, based on certain rules, with the whole tariff saga continuing for a few years. While in the US, it was much more political, ad hoc decision to ban these cars. So I think that seemingly there is a convergence, but I think it has not been coordinated, and these are kind of parallel developments, but not necessarily connected.
All right, so really interesting stuff. EVs, where they are, where the data is stored, that's going to be an ongoing story. Thank you so much, Alicja Bachulska. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here for more news and commentary on TVP World.